Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of Review from Tracy's Point. And today we are here to talk about the presidential pardons that Donald Trump gave before exiting stage left in his presidency. And so he has done other pardons, throughout his 4-year term, but the ones that he did on his last day in office made a lot of news buzz. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about the people that didn't get pardons. Thousands of people apply for pardons every year in America, and a lot of them do not get their pardons granted. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the process that it takes to get a pardon, because after, reading comments on social media and just hearing, the chatter going on, I realized that a lot of people don't really understand how pardons work. And so I figured, if I was going to go ahead and talk about this, then I would start with how, pardons actually take place. And I had actually said I wasn't going to do the video because it was so many people that he pardoned on his last day. It was like over 140 people received these final pardons from him. But then my sister called, and those of you who've been following my channel for a while, that my ex is serving multiple life sentences in federal prison. And so my sister called yesterday and she was like, girl, I was going through that list, trying to see if he was on the list. And of course, he was not on the list, because I don't think he has actually gone through the process to get a pardon and, that type of thing. So anyway, let's start with the basics of how a person get a pardon and exactly what is a pardon. And I don't have my glasses, so I got to blow this up. So basically, when somebody wants a pardon, the president does the federal level pardons. And so if you know the president, of course, you can call him on the phone and say, hey, can you give me a pardon? Or can you give me clemency, I think is the official word for it. So clemency is then broken down into one, a pardon, and the other one is a commutation, which means that they commute your sentence to the time that you serve. And so under the Department of Justice, there is a agency, which is the Office of Pardon. And the Office of Pardon has someone who's called a pardon attorney. And so the pardon attorney assists the president in the exercise of his power under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, the Pardon Clause. And then it tells you to see executive orders dated June 16th, 1893. Transferring clemency petition, processing, and advisory functions of the Justice Department. So basically, even though the president is the one that's granting the pardons, there's still procedures in place where these requests are actually reviewed by somebody, with legal standard, who can look at the cases and make several determinations. And so that is handled by the Office of the Pardon Attorney. So then the next section, and then just to tell you guys a little bit more about what the Deputy Attorney General receives and reviews all petitions for executive clemency, which includes pardon after completion of sentence, commutation of sentence, remission of fine or restitution, and reprieve, initiates and directs the necessary investigations and prepares a report and recommendation for submission to the president in every case. In addition, the Office of the Pardon Attorney acts as a liaison with the public during the pendency of a clemency petition, responding to correspondence and answering inquiries about clemency cases and issues. And so the following sets forth guidance in clemency matters. So section 9, 140.111, role of the prosecuting component in clemency matters. And so the pardon attorney routinely requests the United States attorney in the district of conviction or of a department litigating component was responsible for the case. The assistant attorney general in charge of the component to provide comments and recommendations on clemency cases that appear to have some merit, as well as on cases that raise issues of fact about the United States attorney or assistant attorney general may be in a position to provide information. Occasionally, the United States attorney in the district in which a petitioner currently resides also may be contacted. In addition, in cases of which the petitioner seeks clemency based on cooperation with the government, the pardon attorney may solicit the views of the United States attorney in the districts in which the petitioner cooperated, if different from the district of conviction, or the views of the assistant attorney general in charge of the department litigating component with which the petitioner cooperated, if different from the prosecuting component. And then it also goes on and gives an example. It says, for example, the tax division, which authorizes and supervises nearly all charges arising under the Internal Revenue laws, will be consulted when a defendant convicted of such a charge seeks clemency, whether or not a division attorney was directly involved in prosecuting the case. While the division to grant clemency generally is driven by considerations that differ from those that dictate the decision to prosecute, the United States attorney or assistant attorneys general prosecutive perspective lends valuable insights in the clemency process. And then the next step is standards for considering pardon petitions. So in general, a pardon is granted on the basis of the petitioner's demonstrated good conduct for a substantial period of time after conviction and service of sentence. The Department of Regulations requires a petitioner to wait a period of at least 5 years after conviction or release from confinement, whichever is later, before filing a pardon application. And then they give the code for that. And the department may grant a waiver of the 5-year requirement in determining whether a particular petitioner should be recommended for a pardon. The following are the principal factors to take into account. So the first one is post-conviction conduct, character, and reputation. So basically how you have behaved while either incarcerated or what you have done after you've served your sentence and, moved on with your life. The second one is the seriousness and relative recentness of the offense. So when an offense is very serious, violent crime, major drug trafficking, breach of public trust, or white collar fraud involving substantial sums of money, a suitable length of time should have elapsed in order to avoid denigrating the seriousness of the offense or undermining the deterrent effect of the conviction. The next one is acceptance of responsibility, remorse, and atonement. And so basically you have to say, I did what I did. I'm sorry for what I did. And I have prayed about it. I've worked it out with God, and I am healed, and I want to be a better person. The next one is need for relief. So the purpose for which pardon is sought may influence disposition of the petition. A felony conviction may result in a wide variety of legal disabilities under state or federal law, some of which can provide persuasive grounds for recommending a pardon. For example, a specific employment-related need for pardon, such as removal of a bar to licensure or bonding, may make an otherwise marginal case sufficiently compelling to warrant a grant in and aid of the individual's continuing rehabilitation. So basically, if you were disbarred as a lawyer because you committed a crime, and now you served your time and the only thing you know how to do is be a lawyer, then you can petition for a pardon, and that would help you get back in the Bar Association. And then the last one is official recommendation and reports. And so the comments and recommendations of concerned and knowledgeable officials, particularly the United States Attorney or Assistant Attorney General whose office prosecuted the case, and the sentencing judge, are carefully considered. The likely impact of favorable action in the district or nationally, particularly on current law enforcement proprieties, will always be relevant to the president's decision. Apart from their significance to the individuals who seek them, pardons can play an important part in defining and furthering and rehabilitating goals of the criminal justice system. And then the next section, which is section 9-140-113, standards for considering commutation petitions, says a commutation of sentence reduces the period of incarceration. It does not imply forgiveness of the underlying offense, but simply remits a portion of the punishment. So basically, when your sentence is commuted, if you were sentenced to 30 years in prison and you've served 10 years, and so a commutation would reduce that 30-year sentence to the 10 years that you've already served, and then you can go home. And so it has no effect upon the underlying conviction and does not necessarily reflect upon the fairness of the sentence originally imposed. Requests for commutation generally are not accepted unless and until a person has begun serving that sentence, nor are commutation requests generally accepted from persons who are presently challenging their convictions or sentences through appeal and court proceedings. When a commutation request is based on the serious illness of the petitioner, an expedited response from the United States Attorney or Assistant Attorney General is always appreciated. If the request involves a sentence of death, an expedited response from the United States Attorney or Assistant Attorney General is essential. And so I guess that's for people that are like either, I know Obama put in this thing called the compassion law, which basically people who are elderly over a certain age, I think it's like 60, 65, if they are ill, then they can get their sentences commuted, and then they're allowed to go home and die in the care of their loved ones. The other one is the death penalty. People who have the death penalty will often ask that the sentence be commuted from the death penalty to maybe life in prison or something like that, to keep them from being executed. So then it says, when a petitioner seeks remission of fine and restitution, the ability to pay and any good faith efforts to discharge the obligation are important considerations. Petitioners for remission also should demonstrate satisfactory post-conviction conduct. And so these are the typical procedures for the average Joe Blow. But of course, we know if you are friends with the president, you probably can bypass a lot of this and just say, hey, I need you to let me get out. And then that gets referred to this office. And then they go through, the paperwork. And I believe that they can, say, no, this person isn't a good candidate. But the president can supersede that and say, well, I'm going to let that person out anyway. So that's a little bit of history on what, pardons and commutations and clemency and all of that is about. And so to give you an idea of how many people, get their sentences, get pardons per president, by the time President Obama left office, he had pardoned 212 people. 189 were pardoned by President George Bush. George W. Bush, and 396 received a pardon from President Clinton. And according to the Justice Department, and all of that's according to the Justice Department. And prior to Donald Trump, commuting these or issuing these 140 plus pardons, it already granted 70 pardons, and the majority of them were in December. And that also is coming from the Justice Department's records. And let's see. So first, before I get into the people that did get a pardon, let's talk about the people that did not get a pardon. Rudy Giuliani. A lot of people thought that Donald Trump was going to pardon Rudy Giuliani. They thought that he was going to pardon his children. They thought he was going to pardon himself. He did not grant any of those pardons, and that particularly is because the Republicans had a conversation with him. They were like, you are facing impeachment, a second impeachment, and if you want us to fight for you, then do not pardon yourself and do not pardon anybody that was close to you, no family members, your attorney, that type of thing. And so I believe that that is why he did not do these pardons for himself and his family members and for his great friend, Rudy Giuliani. And so it was kind of quiet about the whole impeachment process most of the week. And then people started asking what happened to the impeachment. Like, y'all were all gung-ho that you were going to impeach him for that, whatever that was y'all called happened at that Capitol. I'm not sure exactly what happened because them look like some paid actors to me. But if they say it was real, it was real. We're going to roll with that story. But, things died down. And so then when they started asking Nancy Pelosi, what's up with the impeachment, homegirl? So now she's back on the job and she says there's definitely going to be an impeachment. They need about 2 weeks. Then the story came out that Donald Trump had not hired any attorneys to represent him. And then Lindsey Graham found him an attorney, basically told him, you have got to challenge this. You've got to have representation. And so they are putting together a team for Donald Trump. If this thing actually goes to court or he actually has a hearing, I believe they need at least 10. So now that it's 50-50, they're going to need 10 Republican senators to vote against Donald Trump in order for him, to the official impeachment to take place and for him to be found guilty. And I believe he's only facing one charge, and I can't remember the exact title that they gave the charge, but it was basically encouraging them folks to run up there to the Capitol and act the fool. And so that's the only charge that he is actually facing. And so we'll just wait and see when that actually happens. So then the next person that everybody thought he was going to pardon was the Speaker of the New York State Assembly. His name is Sheldon Silver. And so in the final hours of his U.S. presidency, Donald Trump awarded clemency to more than a dozen Jewish people. Now they have Jews, but I was always told that Jews was like derogatory. And this was from a website that I'm getting this from. So they refer to them as Jews. And so I'm just going to tell you guys what they said. So it says more than a dozen Jews who had been convicted of crimes, but not Sheldon Silver, the disgraced former New York Assembly Speaker. Silver was not on the list of 143 people granted clemency, a traditional act for outgoing presidents. This means the former Democratic power broker will continue serving a prison term on corruption charges. And Donald probably didn't pardon the man because he's a Democrat. But wasn't Donald Trump a Democrat up until he decided to run for president? And remember, he had made that statement years ago that if he wanted to be president, all he had to do was run as a Republican and they would vote him into office. And so I don't know, Donald Trump might have been working for the Democrats at the end of his presidency to ensure that not only did they lose the White House, but they also lost the Senate and the Congress. So everything is Democratic control at this point. So the New York Times reported that Trump abandoned a plan to give clemency to Silver at the urging of the New York Republicans and the New York Post newspaper. And so among the Jews who did make the cut were several whose crimes affected Jewish communities or who had the support of Aleph Institute, an organization that works with Jews who are incarcerated. And then this one was funny. This was the guy, Tiger King. Y'all remember that documentary? And so the guy, Joe Exotic, he had done got a limousine, y'all. He had the limousine biked up to the prison, okay? Thinking that Donald Trump was about to pardon him. So Netflix Tiger King star was expecting clemency from Trump and even had a stretched limo standing by outside his prison in Fort Worth, Texas. Trump handed out 73. Okay, we're not going to keep going through that. So he says, I was too innocent and too gay, gay in all caps, to deserve a pardon from Trump. The 57-year-old exotic, whose real name is Joseph Maldonado Passage, wrote on Twitter, I only mattered to Don Jr. when he needed to make a comment about me to boost his social media posts. Boy, were we all stupid to believe he actually stood for equal justice. His corrupt friends all come first. So Exotic is serving a 22-year sentence for participating in a murder-for-hire plot and violation of wildlife laws. And Donald Trump Jr. said during a radio interview last April that Exotic's sentence sounded aggressive and jokingly said he was going to advocate for a pardon. Later that month, during a press conference, Trump said he would take a look at Exotic's case. Exotic's arch-rival zoo owner Carol Baskin took a victory lap on Fox News on Wednesday. I'm taking a deep breath because I feel such a sense of relief, said Baskin, who a judge awarded Exotic's Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park in Oklahoma last year. From the very first time that he was sentenced, I have worried about there being a presidential pardon that could undo all of the hard work that went into bringing this person to justice. When today at noon, a new president was sworn in, I felt like I was finally safe from that threat. In September, Exotic sent a handwritten letter to Trump pleading for a pardon. Quote, if I have ever looked up to anyone, it would be you. Not because I need you to save my life, but because you stand for what you believe, no matter what anyone thinks. I am begging you to listen to the millions who see the truth. Allow me to make you proud, to make America proud, to make the world proud. Be my hero, please. So Trump was not his hero. He didn't give him a reprieve. So then another person, Rich Menendez, others who had been hoping to get clemency didn't, among them Rich Mendez, a Miami Latin music mogul who last year began serving a 5-year sentence in a wire fraud case. Despite support from several Trump allies, the former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik and Newsmax broadcaster John Cordillo, Mendez did not make the final cut. And then this one I thought was a little interesting. This was a girl, her name is Reality Winner. And so Reality had been incarcerated since 2018, serving a 63-month prison sentence for leaking to the press a National Security Agency report analyzing foreign attacks on U.S. election infrastructure. And her aunt had organized a grassroots movement pushing for the daughter's release and maintained a sliver of hope that she might be back home for the holidays. Oh, so this was her mother that I had cut out part of the article to cut it down because it was really long. And so Reality is a native of Kingsville, and she was living in Georgia and working for the NSA as a translator, which is, what is that, National Security Administration, as a translator in 2017, when she obtained classified agency documents that detailed previous attempts by Russia to interfere in American elections by hacking voter registration databases. She didn't go through an official channel to flag the report, which often results in retaliation, and instead leaked the documents to The Intercept, an investigative journalism outlet. After it published a story about the documents, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission called the report credible, urged states' elections officials to read it, and issue guidance on how to tell whether their offices had been compromised by hackers. And so according to the internal emails of state voting officials, which were obtained by The Intercept through public records requests, potential targets of the Russian scheme had not been made aware of the plot until the documents leaked by Winner became public. And so she ended up being arrested, and she was a young girl too. Like, I think she was in her early 20s if she was that old. And let me skip down here. And so they talk about how the leak was, quickly traced back to her. The Trump administration pursued charges against Winner under the Espionage Act, a law that was originally intended to prosecute spies during wartime, but which started with the Obama administration, has increasingly been used to target whistleblowers. And during the pretrial phase, attorneys for the government attempted to paint Winner as a terrorist and insinuated she'd attempted to flee the country and join the Taliban if given the opportunity, citing notebooks found in Reality's home, in which she allegedly mentioned the names of several leaders in other countries, and she was denied bond, found guilty, and sent to jail. And like I say, it was a really, really long story. I'm not going to read all that. The last person that people were hoping that Donald Trump would pardon, which I thought there wasn't really a shot in hell that it was going to happen, and that was R&B singer R. Kelly. And the reason I didn't think it would happen is, one, because of the nature of the charges that are currently pending against him. Two, because, as I started this video off, it is a very long process in which to get somebody a pardon. And three, because he would have to have like a support system, somebody backing him. As I was telling you, different organizations, like a lot of the information I was able to find, I got it off of change.org, because when you actually get an organization to help you with your case, a lot of those people work pro bono, and so they'll start these fundraising campaigns to raise money to assist them, with their time and energy and lobbying people to help. And so, of course, R. Kelly doesn't have that. And then the other thing is, you can be pardoned before you've actually gone to trial or been sentenced in a case, but you have to basically say you're guilty, that you did what they accuse you of doing. And I don't believe that he is willing to do that, because he is standing by his innocence and saying that, these charges against him are false and that these people are out to get him. And so for that reason alone, I found that a pardon would be highly unlikely. And then, like I say, based on the nature of the charges against him, I don't think any president would be willing to put themselves out there, and that just would have been, everything that Donald Trump was dealing with at the end of his presidency, this is the last thing that he would have wanted to add to the list. And, and remember I said that the reason he didn't pardon his kids or pardon Giuliani is because the Republicans came to him and said, don't do it. So can you even imagine if he even uttered that he was thinking about giving R. Kelly a pardon, what that would have ended up looking like. And so that's why I had zero expectation that that was going to happen. But I do know that a lot of the fans and supporters were hoping, against all hope, that there was some kind of way that he would end up on that list. So now let's move over to the people that actually were pardoned. And what I want to say before I go into this, one of the things that they were, advertising in the media was that Donald Trump was going to pardon like 70 white collar crime individuals, rich, influential people that got caught up and went, to jail. And then the other 73 was actually going to be people who were sentenced unjustly under the Clinton administration, backed by now President Joe Biden, the 94 crime bill. And so immediately we were all thinking, okay, this is going to be a lot of African American people that are going to get released from prison. Well, I can tell you that that is not the case, okay? It was far more non-African American people, non-Black people that received these pardons than it was actual Black people. And I really can't give you a true number because I spent the last 2 days trying to get, information, trying to get pictures of these people, trying to find out their race, their ages, and all of that type of stuff. And it was like finding a needle in a haystack. So I would say, I can't think of the last count, but I think I was only able to find maybe 27 pictures of the whole 143 people that was released. And so I can just give you the information, that I was able to find. And I could only find articles on a few of the people. So most of this is just going to be basic information, a couple of sentences, and then several of them are going to have much more information. And so this came from one of the articles that I read hours before Joe Biden's inauguration. As his U.S. presidency was due to begin, Donald Trump changed the lives of 143 people through presidential pardons and commuting of sentences. The list included some big names, from former White House aide Steve Bannon to rapper Lil Wayne. So just 24 women featured, including Mary Ann Locke, who started a 20-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense just 6 weeks after giving birth via C-section. 15 people had sentences commuted for nonviolent drug convictions, many of them first-time offenders, with some facing up to life in prison. Clarence Olin Freeman's full pardon came almost 56 years after he was convicted of operating an illegal whiskey still, the oldest crime on the list, with the briefing notes mentioning he'd since fled a law-abiding life. Other convictions were far more recent, or in this case, of former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, a conviction had not yet been recorded as the case was still being processed. Here are some of the more notable people on the list. Steve Bannon, he's an example, when I was talking about R. Kelly, that it was possible that R. Kelly could have gotten a pardon, but it was just highly unlikely due to the nature of the charges against him. So Steve Bannon, former White House aide, was granted clemency after last year being charged over an alleged scheme to defraud hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters in a campaign that raised more than 35 million US dollars to build The U.S.-Mexico border wall, you guys know you cannot do fundraisers and give the government money outside of your taxes to do anything related to the government. And so he pleaded not guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. He has been granted a full pardon, but there's a chance Mr. Bannon could still be charged in a state court in New York where the presidential pardon would not help him. And so the White House said that Mr. Bannon has been an important leader in the conservative movement. And so that's why they let him go, because he was important. And he was Trump's friend. Elliot Brody, a Republican fundraiser, he was pardoned after being involved in a scheme to lobby the Trump administration to drop an investigation into the looting of a Malaysian wealth fund. The Trump donor pleaded guilty to conspiring to violate foreign lobbying laws. The former deputy national finance chair of the Republican National Committee has been granted a full pardon. Brody resigned from the Republican National Committee in 2018 after it was revealed that he paid $1.6 million to a Playboy playmate with whom he had an extramarital affair. Dwayne Michael Carter, also known as Lil Wayne. Rapper Lil Wayne was facing up to a decade in prison for the illegal possession of a firearm. He had pleaded guilty to possession of a firearm and ammunition by a convicted felon linked to a conviction recorded more than a decade ago. The rapper tweeted a photo of himself with Trump in October 2020, saying he met with Trump to discuss criminal reform. I remember everybody was dragging Lil Wayne when he posted that picture and was like, he was a sellout. You know, these rappers need to go sit down and shut up somewhere. Lil Wayne knew what he was doing. So the 5-time Grammy Award-winning artist has been granted a full pardon. Wayne, 38, whose real name is Dwayne Michael Carter Jr., was scheduled to be sentenced January 28th after pleading guilty to a federal charge of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, and he faced up to 10 years in prison. Bill K. Capri, also known as Kodak Black, another rap personality, 23-year-old Kodak Black, pleaded guilty to weapons charges in 2019. He was sentenced to 46 months in prison for making a false statement on a federal document after providing incorrect information in order to buy guns. A chorus of U.S. music and sporting personalities have been calling for his release, including Lil Yachty, Lil Pump, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, and Las Vegas Raiders cornerback Trayvon Mullen. He had served close to half his sentence, which has now been commuted. And this was my favorite one, you know, because I love me some Kwame Kilpatrick, okay? I just love a big chocolate man. That's all it is. Kwame was corrupt, but his sentence was so ridiculous that I'm glad that he finally got his sentence commuted. And I actually did a video last year around May or something, April, May, a little earlier. But anyway, there was a report out that Trump had pardoned Kwame, that Kwame was coming home. Everybody was all excited. And then at the last minute, the Bureau of Prisons came out and said he did not qualify for a pardon and that they were not going to release him. And so, you know, Trump did circle back and, you know, grant the pardon for him. So the former mayor of Detroit has been in prison for close to 7 years for his involvement in a racketeering and bribery scheme while in office. The now 50-year-old resigned as mayor in 2008 and had been sentenced to a 28-year term. The White House says that Mr. Kilpatrick taught public speaking classes, and has led Bible study groups with his fellow inmates during his time in jail. Two Michigan House of Representative members, Karen Whitsitt and Sherry Gay Dagnago, said they strongly supported the decision to commute Mr. Kilpatrick's sentence. Anthony Lewandowski, former Google engineer Anthony Lewandowski, was sentenced to 18 months in prison last year after he was accused of stealing confidential technology from the company's self-driving car unit before joining rival Uber. See, these kind of crimes that these white folks be getting into. Before leaving Google to start his own self-driving truck company, which Uber eventually purchased, Lewandowski downloaded a trove of Google's self-driving car technology, resulting in him facing 33 counts of intellectual property theft. At the time, it was one of Silicon Valley's highest profile trade secrets theft cases. Trump has granted him a full pardon, and the White House said he has paid a significant price for his actions and plans to devote his talents to advance the public good. Lewandowski lost his job with Uber in 2017. The White House explained their reasoning behind all 143 executive grants of clemency in a lengthy statement on its website. Okay, guys, I kept looking at my camera thinking, okay, why does that camera look like it's sliding down? So I had to stop, okay, because it was sliding down, but I'm back now. So there was a statement that was on the Department of Justice, or on the White House website, that basically was explaining how Trump came to the decisions that he did for the people that he granted pardons to. But when I tell y'all, as soon as Biden took that oath of office and was sworn in as president, they snatched down everything off the White House website that had anything to do with Trump. And I was like in the process, I was reading through the document and then went back to download it and it was gone. And they said, go to the archives. And then when I went to the archives, there was a message on there that basically stated that not everything that Trump did would be on that website. And so I was unable to find that document, but we're going to move right along. And so some of these are going to go really quick. They're just one sentence. And then some of them I am going to give you, and pretty much on the African-American people that I was able to find that were pardoned, I'll tell you their story. But the rest of these are just 1 or 2 sentences. So Alex Ajimi was convicted of a financial crime in 1996 and served 5 years in prison. He has been granted a full pardon. Fred Keith Alford was convicted of a firearm violation in 1977 and served 1 year unsupervised probation. He has been granted a full pardon. And Michael Ashley was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison for bank fraud. His sentence has been commuted. Dr. Muhammad Reza Banki was charged with monetary violations of Iranian sanctions and making false statements about the charges, and they were overturned, and he has been granted a full pardon. Lynn Barney was sentenced to 35 months in prison for possessing a firearm as previously convicted felon after having previously been convicted for distributing a small amount of marijuana. She has been granted a full pardon. Let's see, David Barron has served 13 years of his life sentence in addition to 20 years for a nonviolent drug conspiracy charge. The father of 6's sentence has been commuted. Dr. Faustino Bernadette failed to report a hospital kickback scheme of which he became aware. He has been granted a full pardon. Carl Andrews Boggs pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy in 2013. He's been granted a full pardon. Christina Bonenkamp has served more than 10 years of a 24-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence has been commuted. Todd Bolanger pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit honest services fraud in 2008. He was granted a full pardon. Robert Boker pleaded guilty to a violation of the Lacey Act, which prohibits trafficking in wildlife almost 3 decades ago. He has been granted a full pardon. Jonathan Braun has served 5 years of a 10-year sentence for conspiracy to import marijuana and to commit money laundering. His sentence has been commuted. Drew Brownstein was convicted of insider trading. He's been granted a full pardon. Tommaso Butti, who's an Italian citizen, was charged with financial fraud involving a chain of restaurants more than 20 years ago, but not convicted in the U.S. He's been granted a full pardon. And I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but the president can only pardon federal charges. He can't pardon state charges. And I forgot to mention when I was talking about Kodak Black is that even though he's been pardoned with the federal charges, now there are some state charges that had to do with an assault or something that happened in New York, I believe, and they are now pushing, saying that they are going to pursue those charges. So even though he's cleared the hurdle on the federal charges, he still may be facing state charges and might get rearrested real soon. Let's see, Drew Brownstein, we talked about him. Ann Butler has served more than 10 years of a nearly 20-year sentence for a nonviolent offense. Her sentence has been commuted. Matthew Antoine Kennedy, his sentence was commuted. Robert William Cawthorn was convicted for making a false statement on a bank loan application and was sentenced to 3 years probation, conditioned upon 180 days home confinement in 1992. He has been granted a full pardon. Craig Cecil was sentenced to life in prison for conspiracy to distribute marijuana. His sentence was commuted. Jeff Cheney had his sentence commuted. Mario Claiborne is serving life imprisonment and has already served more than 28 years in prison. His sentence has been commuted. David Lamar Clanton was convicted of false statements and related charges. He has been granted a full pardon. Fred Dave Clark has served more than 6 years in federal prison for a first-time nonviolent offense. His sentence has been commuted. Jeffrey Allen Conway was granted a full pardon. Corvain Cooper. This was an interesting story. So Corvain Cooper has served more than 7 years of a life sentence for his nonviolent participation in a conspiracy to distribute marijuana. The 41-year-old sentence has been commuted. On June 18, 2014, Corvain was convicted in the United States District Court of the Western District of North Carolina in Charlotte for the crime of conspiracy to distribute and possession with intent to distribute marijuana and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. This was a nonviolent crime. Corvain did not use any violence or even threaten any violence in this case. Despite former Attorney General Eric Holder's promise not to seek life sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, the United States Attorney sought and obtained a life sentence under the federal 3 strikes law. Corvain Cooper's 2 prior felonies that were the first 2 strikes were a conviction in California for possession of marijuana and 1 conviction of possession of codeine cough syrup without a prescription. When he was sent to prison for the rest of his life for selling marijuana, Corvain was 34 years old, a father of 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 8, a fiance, a son, a friend, and a small business owner selling clothing and footwear. And that three-strike rule has a lot of people messed up. I have a cousin, and I may have mentioned this in a prior video. I have a cousin that will be getting out of prison, out of state prison, maybe in 2023, 2024. He has spent 32 years in prison under the three-strike rules because him and his girlfriend, I don't know, they had broken up. They have a child together. I don't know what was going on in their situation. It's been so long ago, I can't even remember. But she accused him of raping her. Now, the rape sentence conviction would have only been 7 years. But because he had the 2 strikes for like non-violent stuff, they gave him the life sentence, which is the 25 years, then plus the 7 years for the conviction on the assault of his baby mama. Okay, so a lot of people have spent a majority of their lives in prison under these state and federal three-strike laws. So Corvain appealed his conviction and sentence, arguing that his sentence of life imprisonment without parole for a nonviolent drug offense as cruel and unusual punishment. The United States Courts of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit upheld the injustice, and the Supreme Court denied to hear the case. After his direct appeals concluded, the state of California enacted Proposition 47 and Proposition 64 as part of legislative drug law reforms after California legalized marijuana. Both laws permitted people like Corvain Cooper to apply to the courts to vacate their marijuana or drug felony convictions and replace them with misdemeanor convictions. Corvain Cooper successfully applied, and both of his felony convictions were thrown out. Both of the 2 strikes were vacated, meaning that Corvain Cooper was no longer eligible for this 3 strikes law. We filed a petition pursuant to 28 United States Code 2255 in the federal court, challenging his life sentence under the 3 strikes law. Since 2 of the 3 strikes were no longer felonies, he could not receive a life sentence. The federal courts have denied our challenge. The case is once again before the United States Supreme Court. If the court allows the sentence to stand, this man would never see his family again. In 2016, In 2016, we submitted an application for clemency with President Barack Obama, asking him to commute this grossly unjust sentence of life imprisonment for a nonviolent drug offense. Unfortunately, before he left office, President Obama denied our clemency petition. Ain't that something, y'all? So anyway, President Trump got him out. Okay, so Corvain Cooper is home. April Coots has served more than 10 years of a 20-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence was commuted. Dr. Robert S. Corcoran was convicted of federal program bribery, and he has been granted a full pardon. Scott Connor Crosby was convicted of federal program bribery, and he has been granted a full pardon. James Brian Cruz served approximately half of a 40-year sentence for a drug crime. His sentence has been commuted. And so James Brian Cruz was convicted in 1997 for his role in a meth dealing ring in the Dallas area. He has served about half of the 40-year sentence in the Federal Correctional Institute of Seagoville, where he's been incarcerated since 2000. Several former inmates he has counseled, along with Robert Jeffress, pastor of First Baptist Dallas and a well-known Trump supporter, vouched for his character. Cruz's projected release date was April 10th, 2034. Trump commuted his sentence to time served. He was also sentenced to 5 years supervised release, a $25,000 fine, and a $100 special assessment. Trump's order left those parts of his sentence intact. And why he didn't just wipe all that out for the poor man so he could get a fresh start? So Randall Duke Cunningham, former California Congressman Duke Cunningham, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for accepting bribes while he held public office and was released in 2013. He has been granted a conditional pardon. Marquise Dargon his sentence has been commuted. And what was funny about him was whenever I was trying to bring up his information, the only thing I could get was this eyeglass wearer company that goes by the same name, but I couldn't find anything on his case. Jamie A. Davidson was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in relation to the murder of an undercover officer in 1993, but witnesses who testified against Mr. Davidson later recanted their testimony in sworn affidavits. He has served nearly 29 years and his sentence has been commuted. John Eston Davis. John Davis has been incarcerated for 4 months for serving as chief executive officer of a healthcare company with a financial conflict of interest. His sentence has been commuted. Anthony DeJohn has served more than 13 years of a life sentence for conspiracy to distribute marijuana. His sentence was commuted. Paul Erickson was sentenced to 7 years in prison for a financial crime. He has been granted a full pardon. And then these guys here, this actually happened locally where I live. Todd Fahar, Thaddeus Baraday, who's an attorney, William Kale, Paul Barons, and Peter Clay. These guys were criminally prosecuted for a state regulatory matter involving the reporting of expenditures to state health agencies in 2008. They have all been granted full pardons. Let's see, they were former executives for this company called WellCare. And WellCare, I believe, was sold last year to another company called Avant or Aviant or something like. They were sold about a year or two ago, but the business is still open. I have a lot of friends that work there, and so they were all convicted on Medicaid or Medicare fraud in 2013. The White House statement downplayed the case, saying it was a widely cited as a case study in over-criminalization and that the men had the support of organizations such as the Cato Institute and the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Federal prosecutors said the men overbilled the government by at least $30 million. A judge sentenced Farhar to serve 3 years in prison and pay a $50,000 fine, while Barons got 2 years and William Kale just over 1 year. In 2013, a jury found the 4 other executives guilty for their roles in the scheme, and they are Thaddeus M.S. Beardley, 52, of Tampa, Florida, received a 6 months prison sentence this month after, and this is an old story from 2013, after pleading guilty. He was also ordered to serve a 3 years of supervised release that includes 1 year of home confinement and pay a fine of $50,000. Baraday was general counsel at WellCare's Medicaid HMO Stay Well and Health Ease in 2006. And then they talk about the other guys. I've already read their sentences. Peter Clay of Wesley, Massachusetts, WellCare's former vice president of medical economics, was found guilty of making false statements to a law enforcement officer and sentenced to 5 years probation. The convictions were all upheld by a federal appellate court in 2016, but President Trump gave them all pardons. Stephen Benjamin Floyd was released from prison in 2009 after pleading guilty to bank robbery by extortion, and he has been granted a full pardon, so he had already served his sentence. Kenneth Charles Fragoso, A United States Navy veteran has served more than 30 years of a life sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. His sentence has been commuted. Robert Francis was served 18 years of a life sentence for nonviolent drug conspiracy charges. His sentence has been commuted. And isn't it just awful? Like, these people had nonviolent drug crimes, charges against them that they were found guilty of, but that crime bill automatically gave them life sentences. And I actually know several people who have had their sentences overturned and commuted. I know in 2020 alone, there were about 4 guys locally that had their sentences commuted under this thing that Trump enacted called the First Step Act, which basically was looking at all those harsh penalties from the 94 crime bill, where all these crack cocaine dealers were sentenced to multiple life sentences, and they basically commuted those sentences, and those guys are now home, and others are still, pleading their cases to have their sentences commuted. Darrell Frazier served 29 years of a life sentence for nonviolent conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute cocaine. The 60-year-old sentence has been commuted. And then a story on him said he's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he pled guilty in a cocaine conspiracy between 1988 and 1989. Agents arrested him at the Los Angeles airport and accused him of flying in with cash from Chattanooga, picking up the cocaine and flying back with it. Frazier pleaded guilty, but his plea deal got him a sentence that he is still serving 30 years later. So thank God he was able to get out. Jessica Freeze was convicted after converting stolen checks and negotiating them through the bank where she worked as a teller at age 20. She has been granted a full pardon. Clarence Olin Freeman was convicted of operating an illegal whiskey still in 1965, and that's the guy who had served the longest sentence of all these people. He had been in jail for 56 years, and so now he gets to come home. Thomas Kenton Ken Ford pleaded guilty to making a material misstatement of federal mining officials. He was granted a pardon. John Duncan Fordham was convicted of 1 count of healthcare fraud. He was given a full pardon. Rodney Gibson was convicted of trafficking drugs in 2009 and has served more than 11 years in custody, and his sentence was commuted. And then here's more on his case. Richland County Sheriff's deputies say a tipster helped narcotics officers seize more than 400 grams of cocaine and over $200,000 in cash. Sheriff Leon Lott said the tipster notified officers that a drug transaction was going to take place between 3 individuals on September 24th on Alpine Road. Officials say when they arrived at the scene, they confiscated over 400 grams of cocaine and $204,745 in cash. Authorities say they arrested and charged 33-year-old Rodney Gibson, 41-year-old Tyrone James Edmonds, and 48-year-old William Stephen Hare with trafficking cocaine. Lott went on to say that as a result of Wednesday's arrest, and remember this happened back when the crime took place, deputies executed a search warrant on Gibson's home. As a result of the warrant, investigators say they found 1 kilogram press, several scales with cocaine residue, Pyrex cups, $1,331 in cash, a 9mm submachine gun, and a .50 caliber rifle. So he got his sentence commuted. Not sure what happened to his compadres. Jennings Gilbert just says his sentence was commuted. George Gilmore was convicted of failure to pay payroll taxes and false statements. He was granted a full pardon. Javier Gonzalez was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute methamphetamines and distribution of methamphetamines in 2005. His sentence has been commuted. Luis Gonzalez has served more than 27 years of a life sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. The 78-year-old sentence has been commuted. Stephen Samuel Grantham was convicted in 1967 for stealing a vehicle when he was 19. He has been granted a full pardon. Joey Hancock was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute a controlled substance, and he has been granted a full pardon. John Harder, former president and CEO of SunWest Management Incorporated, has served more than 4 years of a 15-year prison sentence for misusing investment funds during the real estate crisis, and his sentence has been commuted. Okay, Dr. Scott Harkonnen was convicted of fraud based on a misleading caption in a press release with respect to a treatment for a disease. Dr. Harkonnen is world-renowned for his discovery of a new kidney disease as well as its cure and treatment. He says that he's looking forward to returning to medicine and has been granted a full pardon. And this is an example of somebody who needed a full pardon and to be able to get back, into the profession that they were in before they were arrested and had their licenses revoked. Michael Harris. Michael Harris, you guys might know as Harry O. He was a Death Row Records co-founder, and he served 30 years of a 25 to life sentence for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and his sentence has been commuted. Harris played a crucial role in the founding of Death Row Records in 1992. While in jail, he gave Suge Knight $1.5 million to help him start the label. Death Row would go on to be the home of Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and Tupac as West Coast rap exploded during the early 90s. Snoop Dogg praised Trump on a Zoom call with reform advocates Alice Johnson and Weldon Angelos, who shared the recording with his permission. The Zoom meeting was convened so that Johnson could break the news to Snoop Dogg that Harris, 59, would be getting clemency after 3 decades in prison for the attempted murder and cocaine trafficking. He was slated to be released in June 2028. Happy Sunday, Snoop Dogg says before hearing the purpose of the Zoom call. Johnson, the first-time drug offender, Trump free from a life sentence following lobbying by Kim Kardashian and later pardoned, then shares the news. Johnson tells Snoop Dogg, "I just got a call from the White House and Harry O is getting clemency. He's coming home, brother." Snoop exclaims, "God is good." Thrill Johnson concurs all the time, all the time, all the time. Harris received word he'd been granted clemency at Lum Park Federal Correctional Institution in California, said Angelos, who received his own pardon from Trump in December. Angelos said Harris sent him an email saying, "Thank God. God is great. It feels like the weight of the world has been lifted off my shoulders." Snoop's effort came even though he's been an outspoken critic of Trump and even made a video in which he pretended to shoot a clown dressed as the president. Angelos credited his first daughter, Ivanka Trump, for Harris' impending release more than 7 years before it was scheduled to take place. The credit on this one goes to Ivanka Trump because Ivanka Trump was not going to take no for an answer. He said Ivanka did this for Alice Johnson, and this is a huge win for hip-hop. Producer and DJ Battlecat posted another photo of the co-founder of Harry O stating in the caption, "Welcome home, King, all 10 toes down to the ground, Jack." Now, I wonder, they said he was in jail for attempted murder. What happened to the person he was trying to get at? Because, them folks in California handle things a little differently and hold grudges a little longer. But let's hope that he's able to live in peace and reclaim his life. Dwayne Harrison, sentence commuted, doesn't say what he did. James Austin Hayes was convicted of conspiracy to commit insider trader. He's been granted a full pardon. Robert Cannon Robin Hayes, former North Carolina Congressman Robin Hayes, is serving a 1-year term of probation for making a false statement in the course of a federal investigation. He has been granted a full pardon. Gary Evan Handler was convicted of conspiracy to distribute and dispense controlled substances in 1984 and served 3 years probation. He's been granted a full pardon. William Ed Henry was sentenced to 2 years probation for aiding and abetting the theft of government property. He's been granted a full pardon. Raymond Hersman was sentenced more than 9 years of a 20-year sentence. His sentence has been commuted. Lou Hobbs has served 24 years of a life sentence. His sentence has been commuted. Abel Holtz pleaded guilty to 1 count of impeding a grand jury investigation in 1995 and was sentenced to 45 days in prison. He has been granted a full pardon. Douglas Jamel was convicted of fraud in 2008. He's been granted a full pardon. And remember, these people that are being granted these full pardons have already served their sentences, most of them. James Johnson pleaded guilty to charges related to migratory birds in 2008. He's been granted a full pardon. Reginald Denez Johnson sentence has been commuted. Gregory Jorgensen, Deborah Jorgensen, and Martin Jorgensen, the Jorgensen family knowingly sold misbranded beef and were convicted in 1996. Gregory and Deborah have been granted full pardons, and Martin Jorgensen has been granted a full pardon posthumously because he has passed away. Cassandra Ann Kosowski has served more than 7 years of a 17-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence has been commuted. The case involved the transportation of mass quantities of methamphetamines from Texas that was distributed in the Fargo, North Dakota and Moorhead area, federal prosecutors said. The White House said in a statement that Kosowski, 46, has been an exemplary inmate and has participated in community service programs. Upon her release, she plans to spend time with her son and seek employment. Authorities have not said when she will be released. Kosowski's commutation was supported by her prison warden. Trey Tavares Kelly was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute 50 grams or more of cocaine base and 5 kilograms or more of cocaine. His sentence has been commuted. Amir Khan pleaded guilty to wire fraud. He has been granted a full pardon. Kyle Komoto served 12 years of his 29-year sentence for a nonviolent telemarketing fraud scheme. The father of 6 sentence has been commuted. Sharon King, sentence commuted. Noah Kleiman served 6 years of a nearly 20-year sentence for a nonviolent crime to distribute marijuana. His sentence has been commuted. John Knox served 24 years of a life sentence for a first-time nonviolent marijuana-only offense. The 73-year-old sentence has been commuted. He was arrested in 1996 and ultimately jailed for life for his role in the smuggling ring moving marijuana through the U.S., Canada, and Europe. Knox's sister, Beth Curtis, created the website lifeforpot.com to document life sentences for nonviolent marijuana crimes. John Knox has been pardoned by Donald Trump on his last day in office. President Barack Obama denied Knox's clemency request in 2017. Recreational marijuana is legal under the law in 15 states, 2 U.S. territories, and Washington, D.C. Though it remains federally illegal, Biden opposes legalizing marijuana, but Vice President-elect Kamala Harris supports legalization, and she's now the Vice President. The Biden administration is expected to tolerate state legal pot businesses as Trump did. Kenneth Curson, former editor-in-chief of the New York Observer, was charged with cyber stalking related to his divorce from his wife in 2015. He's been granted a full pardon. Michael Liberty was convicted for campaign finance violation and later was indicted for related offenses in 2016. He's been granted a full pardon. And I think I already talked about Mary Ann Locke. She served 11 years of a 20-year sentence for nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence was commuted. Tina Logan served 8 years of a 14-year sentence for nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence was commuted. Wei Kuo Long, but he served nearly half of a 50-year sentence for a nonviolent conviction for conspiracy to manufacture and distribute marijuana. The 58-year-old sentence has been commuted. Hector Madrigal Sr. Just says his sentence was commuted. Chalana McFarland served 15 years of a 30-year sentence. A former real estate closing attorney based out of Stone Mountain received a 30-year federal prison sentence in 2005, according to a report from that time in the Atlanta Business Chronicle, for masterminding a local multi-million-dollar mortgage fraud scheme. According to the Atlanta Business Chronicle report, McFarland was the ringleader in a mortgage fraud scheme that spanned the late 90s and early 2000s, inflating property values and using fake broker information to secure mortgage loans. The fraudulently obtained loans totaled nearly $20 million, and McFarland was ordered to pay more than $11 million in restitution when she was convicted. According to then U.S. Attorney David Namias, now a Georgia Supreme Court Justice, McFarland corrupted the entire system for her own profit, with one of the largest cases of mortgage fraud in this district, which devastated a number of local communities. Her case was one of a number that received attention from Trump through the Can Do Foundation, a group that advocates for clemency on behalf of nonviolent offenders. In a personal description of the foundation's website, she expressed deep regret for the fraud scheme, but argued she'd been singled out to be made an example of. Remorse is a ghost that haunts my life. It is hard to express the sorrow I feel about the choices I made that led to my incarceration. I am ashamed of my actions. It's more than just embarrassment or regret. Countless days I have laid in my bunk, reliving my mistakes over and over. If I could go back in time, I would do so many things differently. The judge chose to make an example of me by handing down, I think it meant what is still considered one of the harshest sentences for mortgage fraud in the country. Even in my own case, I was sentenced nearly 4 times that of any of my co-defendants. I came to understand that justice and fairness can be incongruent. As an aspiring attorney, wife, and mother of a 3-year-old, my life as I knew it came to an end. And that was from Ms. McFarland. The White House brief description on her case noted the shorter sentences given to others associated with the fraud ring. And that was their reason for granting her clemency, because other people got shorter sentences. It says, though she went to trial, Ms. McFarland actually cooperated with authorities by informing them of a potential attack on the United States attorney. Her co-defendants who pled guilty, however, received lesser sentences ranging from 5 to 87 months. Ms. McFarland was a model inmate and is now under home confinement. the White House release on Trump's pardon said. She was released to house arrest in Marietta last year. An NPR report from last summer documented her reunion with her now adult daughter. Imagine that her daughter was 3 when she went to prison. Out of all the things that I've done in my life, all the accomplishments that I've had over the years, you are the absolute one thing that I got right, McFarland was quoted telling her daughter. On the Can Do Foundation site, McFarland wrote of how she was able to self-reflect in prison. Over the last decade, I have gotten to know my true self, and I like her. I have learned that family is the most important treasure you could ever have in your life, and I am so thankful for mine. I also came to the realization that the world owes me nothing, she wrote. I owe a debt to my daughter that can never be repaid. My choices left her motherless. I know she loves me, and I pray that someday when she is old enough to grasp it all, that she will forgive me. Wow. Next up, Brian McSwain served an 18-month sentence for a drug crime committed in the early 1990s. He's been granted a full pardon. Dr. Solomon Melgen was convicted of healthcare fraud and false statements. His sentence is commuted. Among those on the list of the 100 pardons by U.S. President Donald Trump is Dominican ophthalmologist based in Florida, Solomon Melgen, sentenced in 2018 to 17 years in prison for defrauding Medicare out of $42 million. Friend of the influential Democratic Senator Robert Bob Menendez, Democrat, New Jersey, also accused of corruption. Melgen was arrested in April 2015 in Palm Beach County, north of Miami, and has since sought his release on bail, which he obtained after paying $18 million. Judge Kenneth A. Morrow also sentenced the renowned eye doctor to 3 years probation. In 2017, he stood trial and was released on $18 million pending a sentence. Hal Knuckson Mergula was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute and distribution of lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, y'all, in 1992. He's been granted a full pardon. Adrian Miller served 6 years of a 15-year sentence after pleading guilty to conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute methamphetamine and possession of a list 1 chemical. Her sentence has been commuted. David E. Miller pleaded guilty to 1 count of making a false statement to a bank in 2015. He has been granted a full pardon. Glenn Moss has been granted a full pardon. Jawad Musa was sentenced to life imprisonment for a nonviolent drug-related offense in 1991. His sentence has been commuted. Baltimore man serving life on a drug charge has his sentence commuted by Trump after 30 years behind bars. When retired federal judge and current defense attorney John Gleeson was asked who the White House should consider for clemency, it took about 5 seconds for him to recommend Jawad Musa. Musa was sentenced to life in prison in 1991 after being involved in a federal drug sting over 1 kilogram of heroin. He had 2 priors, and the sentencing judge lamented that he had no discretion. He told Musa to hang in there. Gleeson, who did not sentence Musa, went into private practice 4 years ago and started an initiative seeking to shorten mandatory prison sentences. Though Musa has been rebuffed by federal judges, including as recently as late November, relief came early Wednesday when President Trump included him among 143 pardons and commutations issued in his last day of office. His case is a window into almost every single wrong with our federal criminal justice system, from trial penalties to how we treat addicts to excessive punishment, Gleeson told The Sun on Wednesday morning. He's honest to goodness, a microcosm, a clinic in where we went wrong. Musa, 56, grew up in Lexington Terrace and plans to return to Baltimore and live with family. His mother, Geraldine Harris of Reservoir Hill, was ecstatic about the news. I haven't seen my son in 30 years. I just want to see my son before I leave this world, she told the Sun. My prayer was answered. Trump signed a batch of pardons and commutations, including political allies, blah, blah, blah. Trump, and then this is what I was talking about before, Trump previously backed First Step Act was passed with bipartisan support and has led to the release of thousands of people. Under the First Step Act, Musa would not have received the same sentence today. During his time in prison, Mr. Musa has strengthened his faith and taken dozens of educational courses. Mr. Musa is blessed with a strong supportive network in Baltimore, Maryland, and has numerous offers of employment. Musa was arrested in 1990 after being involved in a reverse sting in which a confidential informant offered to sell drugs to someone Musa knew. Musa provided $20,000 cash for the transaction, which was to take place in Manhattan. Instead of being provided heroin, DE agents moved in. Musa received a mandatory life sentence because he had 2 prior convictions. The judge's discretion has been taken away from him, the sentencing judge said at the time. Kenneth Winston, who prosecuted the case and later rose to Assistant Attorney General for National Security, wrote to the acting pardon attorney in 2016 that justice has been done for Mr. Musa's drug crime in 1991, and he has more than paid his debt to society. Mercy and fairness now dictate that he be given the opportunity to rejoin society and enjoy the balance of his life as a free man. Gleason, Musa's current attorney and a federal judge in Brooklyn from 1994 to 2016, took up Musa's case in 2017 as part of his pro bono Holloway project, named after a defendant he's sentenced to 57 years and later moved to release, saying he viewed the sentence as unfair. Current federal prosecutors assigned to the case opposed the request, however. Among other things, they said Musa had forged a letter from the warden at the prison supporting his release. On November 23, 2020, New York U.S. District Court Judge Richard J. Sullivan, a Trump appointee, denied his request for release. Sullivan noted Musa's good behavior since 2012, when Musa said he overcame a drug problem and said he could revisit the request for release at a later time. The court is sympathetic to Musa's application and the obvious disparity between his sentence and those of defendants charged with the same crimes based on similar conduct after 2018, Sullivan ruled. But other than pointing to the general unfairness of Congress's decision to not make the First Step Act retroactive, Musa has not given the court sufficient reason to grant his request for compassionate release. Gleason said that he was asked by Josh Dubin, an attorney who he described as an intermediary to the White House for names of people deserving clemency. He said Wednesday's decision did not come as a surprise. Gleason said he was delighted for Musa, but said he was ashamed to be a part of a system that would do this to someone like Jawad. We're happy for Jawad, but it's impossible, in my view, to lose sight of the fact that it should never have happened. He shouldn't have had to wait 30 years for a little bit of justice. Records show that Musa was being held at a high-security prison in Florence, I guess that's Colorado, C-O-L. His mother says she stayed up all night waiting to find out about the clemency petitions. Thank you, Trump, she said. I've got no problems with you. Dr. Frederick Nahas pleaded guilty to 1 count of obstructing justice in a healthcare investigation. He's been granted a full pardon. Hillel Namad was convicted of sports gambling. He has been granted a full pardon. Sidney Navarro served nearly 8 years of a 27-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence has been commuted. In addition, Ms. Navarro obtained her GED, participated in an extensive work program, and earned excellent work evaluations. Notably, Ms. Navarro was chosen to speak to at-risk youth in the community through the SHARE program. Upon her release, Ms. Navarro wishes to reunite with her daughter and seek employment. Isaac Nelson is serving a mandatory 20-year sentence for conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute and distribution of 5 kilograms or more of cocaine and 50 grams or more of crack cocaine. His sentence has been commuted. John Nystrom failed to alert the proper authorities when he learned that a subcontractor was receiving double payments for work performed while working as a contractor on a school reconstruction project. He has been granted a full pardon. And so, let's see. President Trump granted a full pardon to John Nystrom, who, other than his conviction, was described by his sentencing judge as a model citizen. His clemency is supported by Governor Kristi Noem and Senator Michael Rounds. Over 10 years ago, while working as a subcontractor on the school reconstruction project, Mr. Nystrom failed to alert the proper authorities when he learned that a subcontractor was receiving double payments for work performed. Mr. Nystrom took full responsibility for his oversight and even tried to pay the Crow Creek tribe, who was paying for the work, restitution before he pled guilty. Mr. Nystrom was since paid his restitution in full. He teaches Sunday school and volunteers for the Knights of Columbus and Habitat for Humanity, among other organizations, and has previously served as a county commissioner. Stephen Odzer was sentenced to 18 months in prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy and bank fraud. He has been granted a conditional pardon. Benedict Oberding was convicted on 1 count of bank fraud. He has been granted a full pardon. Eric Wesley Patton was convicted of making false statements on a mortgage application in 1999. He's been granted a full pardon. Lerna Lee Paulson served 7 years of a 17-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence has been commuted. Michael Pelletier has served 12 years of a 30-year sentence for conspiracy to distribute marijuana. The 64-year-old sentence has been commuted. And then in his story, he talks about how he contracted COVID, but fortunately he survived. And though he has type 2 diabetes, he felt like, he should have been given some kind of, compassion and maybe released earlier because he, fit the profile of somebody who could easily get COVID. And he says, my clemency petition was submitted during the Obama clemency project, but was never ruled on. It's still pending today. And I honestly believe that President Trump will be the man who will end this nightmare and reunite me with my family. His case was championed for years by Amy Povah, founder of the Can Do Foundation, which lobbies for clemency for lesser known people. Desiree Perez was convicted for her involvement in a conspiracy to distribute narcotics. She has been granted a full pardon. Tara Perry commuted her sentence. She served nearly 7 years of a 16-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. She has maintained, good prison record and has obtained her nursing certification. Ms. Perry also enjoys singing during the prison religious services. Upon her release, she plans to spend time with her mother and seek employment. Dwayne Phelps has served 11 years in prison for conspiracy to distribute methamphetamines. His sentence has been commuted. Johnny D. Phillips Jr. was convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and mail fraud in 2016. He has been granted a pardon. Albert Ferrell Jr. is actually the ex-husband of Judge Jeanine Pirro, who has one of those court TV shows. And Trump initially did not have him on the list, but as he was walking out of the White House, he said, oh yeah, let him go, give him a pardon. He deserves a pardon too. So he was a real estate development lawyer and a top Republican fundraiser in New York State. And he served just over a year in prison after being convicted of conspiracy and tax evasion in 2000. Pirro had represented Trump himself, one of the nation's most famous real estate developers, before his presidency in some of his deals. I'm in shock. I went to bed last night having read the list, assuming I wasn't getting a pardon, Pirro told the Daily Beast. It certainly is a nice act on the part of the president. It has been 20 years since I served my time, and it allows me to engage again in public companies, which I haven't been able to do previously. Amy Povas served 9 years of a 24-year sentence for a drug offense before President Bill Clinton commuted her remaining prison sentence in 2000, and then now Trump has given her a full pardon. Representative Rick Renzi, former Arizona Republican Representative Rick Renzi, was convicted of extortion, bribery, insurance fraud, money laundering, and racketeering in 2013 and sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, 2 years of supervised release in order to pay a $25,000 fine, and he has been granted a full pardon. Greg Reyes was convicted of securities fraud, but his convictions were thrown out. He was later retried, convicted, and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, but has been out of jail for 8 years. He was granted a full pardon. Jody Lynn Richter served 10 years of a 15-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense, and she had her sentence commuted. Lavon Roach served 25 years of a 30-year sentence for nonviolent drug charges. Her sentence has been commuted. And a little bit about her story is, Lavon Roach, a tribal citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, who has been incarcerated since 1997 for a nonviolent drug charge, has had her sentence commuted. Roach, 56, was convicted of a conspiracy to distribute methamphetamines charge in 1997 by a South Dakota jury and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Roach admits she was a drug addict and dealer who became romantically involved with a drug kingpin. She was scheduled to be released on July 14, 2013. I am responsible for not only hurting my family, but my community with the poison I distributed, Roach told Truth Out in December 2016. Roach has been considered a model inmate. While incarcerated, she completed a non-residential drug program. Additionally, she completed a 2-year paralegal course and has taught GED courses to other inmates. Since being incarcerated, Roach's father and mother passed away. She has 3 children and several grandchildren. Mary Roberts served 10 years of a 19-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence was commuted. James Romans received a life sentence without parole for his involvement in a conspiracy to distribute marijuana and has served more than 10 years in prison. His sentence was commuted. David Rowland received 2 years probation after his asbestos removal license had lapsed when he agreed to remove asbestos found in elementary school, and he has been granted a full pardon. Ferrell Damon Scott has served nearly 9 years of a life imprisonment sentence for possession with intent to distribute marijuana. His sentence has been commuted. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for possession. Supporters said under Martin's sentencing guidelines, Scott would not have received such a harsh sentence. Former acting United States Attorney Sam Sheldon, who prosecuted his case, wrote that he strongly does not believe that Mr. Scott deserves a mandatory life sentence. Scott has been an exemplary behavior record and appealed to President Obama for clemency, but was denied. Scott was 13 years into his life sentence, serving time at the United States Penitentiary in Beaumont when Trump granted clemency. He is now 58 years old. Avim Sila was indicted in 1986 for espionage in relation to the Jonathan Pollard case. He has been granted a full pardon. Adriana Sherrill was imprisoned for 24 months after she was convicted of conspiracy to traffic in counterfeit goods, commit copyright infringement, and introduce misbranded food into interstate commerce. Her sentence has been commuted. And let's see what her case was all about. So her and her husband Joseph were sentenced in 2017 for their roles in trafficking more than 3.7 million bottles of counterfeit 5-hour energy drinks. The shareholders manufactured the counterfeit product at an unsanitary facility using untrained day workers and mixed unregulated ingredients into the vats, according to a 2017 statement from the Department of Justice. Sherrill received a 26-month sentence for her role in the operation. Sherrill's pardon was supported by community leaders, including Chula Vista Deputy Mayor John McCain, according to a statement from the White House. The statement went on to say that Sherrill is a mother and a deeply religious woman who had no prior convictions, and that during her time in prison, she mentored her fellow inmates and demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to rehabilitation. Robert Sherrill. So Robert Sherrill was convicted of conspiracy to distribute and possession with intent to distribute cocaine. He was granted a full pardon. Just after midnight on Wednesday, Robert Sherrill got a phone call from a friend in Washington, D.C. saying he had gotten a pardon from outgoing President Donald Trump. The North Nashville native didn't believe his friend at first, but then he saw the official announcement posted to the White House website. I had 10 emotions at one time. I can't even explain it, he told the Tennessean. I lost it. I haven't been to sleep since. At 9 a.m. Wednesday, he was still buzzing with excitement. Sherrill was previously convicted on drug charges and granted clemency by then Governor Bill Haslam in 2019. Haslam's pardon also covered Sherrill's 2002 escape from a Department of Children's Services home. Sherrill said that pardon enabled him to vote for the first time in the 2020 election. The White House touted Sherrill's rehabilitation in its announcement. Mr. Sherrill has taken full responsibility for his criminal past and received treatment for his drug addiction. He started a commercial cleaning business as well as a nonprofit organization that mentors at-risk youth. Sherrill says that he was in disbelief that he got 2 pardons in just 2 years. I've got to be doing something right, he said. God is good. In 2019, Sherrill and then Vice President Mike Pence and U.S. Representative Mark Green, a Republican from Clarksville, were instrumental in helping him gain clemency from Haslam. These individuals receiving pardons have made positive contributions to their communities and are worthy of the forgiveness that may help them restore their rights or obtain employment. Those receiving commutations will gain another chance to become contributing members of society, Haslam wrote in a 2019 statement. Clemency requires attempting to balance mercy and justice, and my legal team and I have taken this responsibility seriously during a thorough review of many cases. Sherrill said he started the process for his presidential pardon right after Haslam's pardon. Pardons are a statement of forgiveness that may assist with restoration of rights or expungement of a criminal record by a judge or overcoming the collateral consequences of a conviction. We don't look like what we've been through. Sherrill launched Imperial Cleaning Systems, a commercial cleaning company, and currently works as its CEO, according to his website. He is also the president of Impact Youth Outreach, a nonprofit organization that advocates for at-risk youth through mentorship and community service. In 2018, Sherrill was named Most Admired CEO by the Nashville Business Journal and received a unanimous positive recommendation from the Tennessee Board of Parole. He is also married and a father of 5. A North Nashville native with what most deem a rough start in life, Robert Sherrill is a true testament to the age-old adage, we don't look like what we've been through. His website reads, as a young man swayed by his environment, Robert's chosen path led him to the federal penitentiary, where he vowed to make a change for his family and himself. Sherrill's lawyer, David Rabin, said in 40 years practicing law and helping with clemency cases, he'd never seen someone get both a state and a federal pardon. It's extremely rare, he said. Rabin hopes that Sherrill's story will inspire change to make the pardon process easier to navigate, especially when it comes to someone facing both state and federal charges. So Kodak Black need to go find those people and see if they can help them. And so on Wednesday, he was celebrating Sherrill's pardon along with him. This is a guy that gives back 110%, Rabin said. He's a new man. Luis Fernando Ciscard was sentenced for conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute cocaine and possession of a firearm during and in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime in 2000. His sentence has been commuted. Brian Simmons has served 5 years of a 15-year sentence for a nonviolent conspiracy to manufacture and distribute marijuana. His sentence has been commuted. Derek Smith has served more than 20 years of a nearly 30-year sentence for distribution of drugs to a companion who passed away. The 53-year-old sentence has been commuted. Joshua J. Smith was released from prison in 2003 after being incarcerated for conspiracy to possess drugs with intent to distribute. He has been granted a full pardon. And then his story, Joshua Smith spent 5 years behind bars in Kentucky for his involvement in drug trafficking, but turned his life around. Since his release in 2003, Smith started a multi-million-dollar company and a nonprofit focused on helping former prisoners transform their lives. Smith was awarded a full pardon Wednesday by President Donald Trump and his committee and his commitment to transformation. First, you just have to take a breath. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable feeling all these years, 25 years ago to now, Smith said. Smith's 2019 request for a pardon was supported by Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, U.S. Representative Tim Burchett, Tennessee Department of Corrections Commissioner Tony Parker, and Tennessee Bureau of Investigations Director David Rauch. Today is a day of redemption that I attribute to God's grace. God rescued me in prison, and I have spent every day trying to help others who need transformation. Smith, who was raised by a single mother, was sent away from home at age 11 due to abuse. He was convicted of 10 felonies by the time he was 16 and was imprisoned by the age of 21, convicted for his involvement in marijuana and cocaine trafficking. He was released from prison in 2003 and set out to transform his life with the help of business mentors. Smith started a residential service company known as Master Service Companies and would become a $30 million enterprise. Some of the company's more than 180 employees were ex-offenders. It has always been important for me to help provide meaning and purpose for people who want a new life, said Smith. Leaving prison with nothing but barriers in front of you leads you back to same old ways. I wanted to stop that. He sold the company in 2019 and started a nonprofit called Fourth Purpose Foundation, which aims to transform the lives of prisoners and their families through training, workforce development, and other reentry programs. In 2019, Smith was also named to Tennessee Governor Bill Lee's Criminal Justice and Reinvestment Task Force. You know, I was never able to rent an apartment even when I had wealth. I could buy an apartment complex, but I couldn't rent an apartment in one, he said. Because remember, when you have these convictions on your record, it stops you from getting jobs, places to live, government funding. You can't get grants and stuff to attend college. So people are really set up to fail even after they've paid their debt to society. Since exiting prison, Smith has spent 15 years actively involved in criminal justice reform in Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, and countries in South America. Smith has supported programs that provide hope, training, and reentry support for prisoners and their families who earnestly want a new life, including hiring and mentoring felons. Today is a day of redemption, but my work is not done. There are a lot of Josh Smiths in prisons across our country, and I am going to help as many as possible find a new purpose. Sherita Steib-Martin was convicted at the age of 19 and sentenced to 10 years in prison and ordered to pay almost $2 million in restitution for the use of fire to commit a felony. She has been granted a full pardon. Donald Trump pardoned New Orleans criminal justice advocate Sherita Steib-Martin as one of his last acts in office Wednesday. The pardon, according to the White House, relieved Steib-Martin of paying nearly $2 million in restitution for a crime she was convicted of when she was 19. Whew. Yes. Steib-Martin is the executive director and co-founder of Operation Restoration, which helps formerly incarcerated women with education, clothing, healthcare, employment, and more. The organization's website says Steib-Martin created the program to help others in her situation. In 1999, when she was 19, she was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, 20 years in state prison, in order to pay $1.9 million in restitution for her role in stealing cars and burning down an auto dealership in Tyler, Texas, according to a 2019 story in Essence.com. She was released in 2009 after serving 9 years and 2 months of the sentence. While in federal prison, Steib-Martin began taking community college courses. She felt education was the key to her overcoming anger issues and putting her life back in order. But when she applied to the University of New Orleans, she was denied admission. She believed she was spurned because of her criminal history. 2 years later, she reapplied, unchecked the box in which she disclosed a criminal history, and got in. She later did research that helped Democratic state reps Vincent Pierre of Lafayette and Ted James of Baton Rouge craft legislation that bans public colleges and universities from asking most applicants about their criminal history. The Ban the Box bill passed in 2017. Patrick Lee Swisher was convicted of tax fraud and false statements. He has been granted a full pardon. David Taman, doctor of financial documents that were the subject of a federal investigation and completed a 7-year sentence in 2019. He has been granted a full pardon. Casey Erlacher, mayor of Mattawa, Illinois, and former footballer Casey Erlacher. He's the brother. Let me go back up. Did I say brother? Okay, Casey Erlacher was charged with conspiracy to engage in illegal gambling. He has been granted a full pardon, and he is the brother of some famous person, Brian Erlacher. But I can't think of what the brother did, but his brother is famous also. Montu Vernon has served over 19 years in prison for committing a string of armed bank robberies in South Carolina. His sentence has been commuted. Blanca Virgin was served 12 years of a 30-year prison sentence. Her sentence has been commuted. Jerry Donald Walden served 23 years of a 40-year prison sentence. His sentence has been commuted. John Harold Wall was convicted of aiding and abetting possession with intent to distribute methamphetamines in 1992. He has been granted a full pardon. Trump delivered a full pardon to John Harold Wall, 63, of Prior Lake, who pleaded guilty in 1992 to one federal count of aiding and abetting possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine. He has already completed his sentence of 5 years in prison and 4 years of supervised release. Prison records show he was released from prison in 1996. Court records show Wall accepted responsibility for his crime as part of his guilty plea. Another count of using a firearm during a drug trafficking offense was dismissed. Wall's pardon was supported by former Deputy General Rod Rosenstein, former Minnesota U.S. Attorney Andy Lugar, and the Office of the Pardon Attorney, the White House said. William Walters was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for insider trading. His sentence has been commuted. Elihu Weinstein is serving his 8th year of a 24-year sentence for a real estate investment fraud. His sentence has been commuted. I wonder if he's related to Harvey Weinstein. Sholem West has served more than 18 years in prison for racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. His sentence has been commuted. Tom Leroy Whitehurst led a conspiracy to manufacture at least 16.7 kilograms of methamphetamine and possessed numerous firearms during the course of the conspiracy and has served 24 years in prison. His sentence has been commuted from life to 30 years. So he still got to stay in jail and serve 6 more years? Wow. Caroline Yates has served nearly 7 years of a 20-year sentence for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. Her sentence has been commuted. Chris Young has served over 10 years of a 14-year sentence for his role in the drug conspiracy. The 32-year-old sentence has been commuted. And Robert Bob Zangrillo was charged in connection with the Varsity Blues investigation. He has been granted a full pardon. A prominent Miami developer who was charged in the infamous Varsity Blues scandal that brought down wealthy parents who illegally paid to get their children into elite universities. Federal prosecutors alleged that Zangrillo made illicit payments of $250,000 to get his daughter into the University of Southern California. He denied the claims and his trial was scheduled for September. Zangrillo, the CEO of the Miami-based firm Dragon Global and one of the main investors in the Magic City Innovation District in Little Haiti, stepped away from the project to tend to his legal woes. The White House described him as a well-respected business leader and philanthropist. Whew, I made it through, y'all. So that's the 140 plus people that either had their sentences commuted or received partial or full pardons for crimes that they committed for which they have already served their time for. Many of them have paid restitution for their crimes. And as I stated when I started, there wasn't a lot of pictures. Like some of these people had common names and there was no information coming up on, who they were. And so I got information on as many of the stories as I possibly could to bring them to you, to let you know on the type of things that people were in prison for. So that's it for me. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.